Hello, I'm here with Suze McCormick. She's a partner at the law firm Morrison Foerster, and she also chairs the Energy and Social Enterprise and Impact Investing practices. First, I want to say welcome, Suze. It's great to have you back for Climate Week. But also, second, I realize that you're in the middle of the devastating fires in San Francisco or around California and San Francisco. So, what is it like right now?
Amy, thanks so much for having me. And I'll just start by saying thanks to you and the climate group for all of the incredible work you're doing on climate. You and I have known each other a number of years and have been part of a group of people focused on climate. But I think it has, unfortunately, the downside of being right is that climate impacts are accelerating. And here in San Francisco, when we initially scheduled this taping, the sun actually came up, but was never seen. It was at 10 o'clock at night, darkness throughout the day, and the sky actually was orange. Today, we have an air quality index of more than 200, maybe 250, extremely unhealthy. So we're all inside wearing N95 masks, and it's really very, very unsettling.
Yeah, no, it's so sad to watch from the East Coast here. Well, as you know, the theme for Climate Week this year is building a better future. So, what's the message that MoFo, as you guys are called, is trying to get across to the audience at Climate Week this year?
I think it's twofold. I think first, the time is now. Climate crises are affecting all of our clients. It's playing out in the boardroom. It's playing out in management decisions related to operations. It's playing out in incentive comp structuring. And I do transactions and equity transactions. It's playing out there as well. And companies and investors are focused both on emission reduction, but also on climate risk scenario analysis. So if you take what's happening right now in California, you already had COVID, you already had civil unrest, you already had shelter in place. You had many businesses able to reopen a little bit, but now they can't, the restaurants can't have outdoor dining. People who could get into the office can't. And so, and that is climate, direct result of climate. And so I think what we're seeing is that a recognition, and hopefully a quick recognition, of kind of how climate plays a role and should play a role in all decision making at the investor and company level. What we are focused on as a firm is solutions. This is the second part, is really getting out of the standard box in terms of how investors deploy capital and how companies operate, and thinking more creatively, blending in solutions related to climate into how investors aggregate capital, how they deploy capital, and then the underlying structure of the company itself, the framework in which a company operates.
So, do you feel that most of your clients now fully grasp the risks that climate change is facing them in the boardroom you mentioned, but now they're actually shifting gears to figuring out how to deploy the capital towards the solutions?
I think there is a growing understanding at the board level. I think the issue has long been for boards of directors that you have a lot of NGOs, environmental groups, and now customers, employees, and investors saying, focus on climate. And then you have boards of companies saying, yes, I get that, but what is my responsibility as a board to the company and its shareholders? How do I think of my job as a board member of a company is not to solve climate change right now. It really is to preserve and look to I would say, the long-term value for shareholders. And that's with the current construct in the US. And so how do I get that climate is happening. How do I think about that in this context? And that's where the interesting conversations are had. I would say 10 years ago, the question I would be asked on fiduciary duties, am I breaching my fiduciary duty if I focus on climate? Now the question that I'm asked, I understand that I have a duty, but help me frame it in light of my existing duties to the company and the shareholders. I'll give you a preview. I think the answer is if you look even a little more long term, so you're looking beyond just the quarter. And again, if you look not just at emission reduction, but at climate risk, at how the operations of a company are going to be impacted by climate, take what's happening in the Bay Area today. I think you see a clear path to ensuring at a board level that some contemplation of climate is part of all of your discussions, or the company is not going to be as financially successful and sustainable in the long term. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because even the scientists are feeling that the impacts of climate change are coming at us faster than anticipated. So do you think there's a sense that sort of going into the next 12 months that boards will be moving more quickly and needing more of your advice and services in a way that they probably hadn't contemplated pre both pandemic as well as pre sort of climate impacts that we've seen this year?
They are. Again, they're asking the questions and figuring out how it impacts the company and the operations. What I am heartened by is that they are also asking the question of, okay, can we be more creative? And this is where kind of the corporate form and the governance and the scaffolding, more of them are now thinking about how a company makes decisions, how it operates, and if you can change the rules by which they play, can you actually achieve a different outcome? And we now have 3 public companies that are public benefit corporations that are publicly traded. So again, the board for a public benefit corporation, this is distinct from a B Corp that is just a certification, but the public benefit corporation in Delaware, where boards have a fiduciary duty to a specific shareholder agreed purpose. And that can be climate, and that can provide a lot of cover in terms of protection for liability, but also a lot of potential upside in terms of the valuation of that company long-term for the shareholders.
Yeah. And I know you and I spoke earlier at the beginning of this pandemic, and now, of course, we've seen sort of the economic disruption that's come along with it. Are you seeing any sort of waiver because of what's happening in the economy from some of your clients?
I am not. I think I may be a little bit of an outlier because I think you come to me as a client because you want to focus on climate. But I am not seeing, even through this, I'm not seeing any reduction of interest, as I mentioned, or limitation on capital. I am seeing more capital. I would caveat that with 2 things. Number one, we have a disconnect between the flow of capital and our capital markets and the real economy right now, and which is not going to last. So when that corrects this fall and what that means, I think we're going to head into a depression. So, again, how much people focus and deploy capital to climate, is a function of actually having the capital. And when they're trying to keep the doors on and the lights on, we may have some dip. But I think that, given the fact that more and more people understand that climate is so key to being able to keep the doors open, I am hopeful that it won't have as much of a dip. But second, what is happening that is incredibly disturbing right now is the disconnect between the mainstream capital markets and the middle and upper classes of this country, and the corporations that have means, and the small companies. In California, I think the numbers are close to 30% of small businesses are closed, and closed permanently. The unemployment that is yielding and the impact on our poorest communities is just huge. And so there are actually a few of us, but I, at the beginning of March, shifted slightly from climate to structuring a $1 billion loan fund for small business. It's one of my creative structures between a public charity and public charity CDFIs to on lend. It has become the fund that was approved by iBank in California for the state of California. I got interested in this and felt the compelling need to start working on this because I had been expecting climate to have this kind of impact on small business, and now COVID hit, and now the small business again is being decimated, at least here in the Bay Area and through California by the fires as well. And there are already breadlines. There is not enough food for people, and so these companies are not focused on climate. They are just trying to survive. And again, unfortunately, they're hitting our poorest communities, our communities that don't have access to capital, and exactly the same communities that are going to be impacted the most by climate change. So that to me, so on the mainstream capital markets and the large companies that hire me, I am hopeful for the communities of color in this country and our poorest communities. I'm having trouble sleeping at night.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You are raising one of the most important things that we've seen, this sort of disparity in our country and around the world. And small businesses are certainly the backbone of our economy. And often the people of color are hit the hardest on both climate impacts and environmental impacts and obviously economic impacts. So bravo to what you've done and accomplished. So last question then, since this is the second year in a row that you're joining Climate Week, is there something in particular that you want, or how do you think about Climate Week as a way of maintaining momentum for climate action? And what do you hope to see out of next week?
It's interesting. CASE is the California Small Business Enterprise Task Force that has put together this loan fund. And I actually borrowed a page from Climate Week. We asked people to join from diverse backgrounds. That is, diverse background, gender, race, sector. So NGO, government, private sector, public sector, age, and skill set. And I think that's one of the reasons it is a different form from the New York Forward Fund and some of the others, but it has been successful because it brought together that coalition for small business. I see the Climate Week as that example, that I borrowed from, sort of on a macro scale. So with the postponement of COP26, it's even more imperative for everyone to get in the same virtual room and figure out how they're going to work together. Some of it is to come together with come together to have solutions that can work. Some of it is really helpful, to be with other people to understand we're all on the same page and empower people to action. And then third is, quite frankly, to borrow. Just like in putting together CASE, I looked at Climate Week and the work of the climate group in terms of how you build coalitions. The same thing, building the broadest possible coalition so governments can come and go, but there is enough support throughout all of the sectors to really affect change.
Well, fantastic, Suze. Thank you so much for participating again this year and for all of your support and all of the work that you do. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you.